I want to talk next about this article at the Wall Street Journal. I'm going to move on because there's a lot to get to today. Last week, we had a really well-received segment on the Thursday and Friday shows about the schism between the left and the right and how there's no meeting in the middle anymore. I wish there were, but there isn't. The left believes government experts are smarter than you, that you're stupid. They've said it. You're the deplorables, the great unwashed, the smelly Walmart people, as the FBI discussed when they were talking about the Trump case, talked about all the people who support Trump. You've obviously been called a litany of really disgusting and grotesque terms, white supremacists, racists, all this stuff. None of that's actually true, but you're called it every day, and it's really tough to take because it's false, and they're the most offensive things you can call someone. But I discussed last week how the left and the right, there's just no meeting in the middle. The left believes that if you would just shut up because you're deplorable and stupid and let government experts take care of things, the world is a perfectible place. Yet we believe in what Thomas Sowell calls a constrained vision of humankind, that we're all sinners, and allowing other sinners who are fallible to have power over our lives rather than having a robust individual liberty is guaranteed to fail because the people have the same flaws we do, even the so-called experts. So I want to discuss this article in the Wall Street Journal that nails it. I did not intend this. It came out this weekend, yesterday or so. I read it and I thought this is going to be great for the show because it discusses exactly what we mentioned last week. It's called Trump and the failure of the expert class. So folks, this is why being a conservative and a libertarian and a good, strong, principles-based Republican matters, because local accountability matters. And when we start voting for people in national elections, in those national elections, these experts take power over our lives. We don't have the ability. Local elections matter, and I want you to look up the principle of subsidiarity. Subsidiarity says this: anytime you can delegate management to someone else, you want it at the most local level for two reasons. One, your vote matters more. If your tax rates and everything else outside of a national military, a court system, we get that. There's, federalism does have a role, obviously, for the federal government, that most power should be delegated to people who are local at the closest and the lowest level of management possible, because your vote matters more. I always use the example of an HOA. If there's 30 homes in an HOA, your vote means a whole lot in the HOA. Your vote in a presidential election, although you must do it critically, just as a matter of pure math, doesn't mean as much. Also, accountability. Your HOA is accountable to you because there's 30 of you, so if 5 of you get upset about something, you can vote out the members of the HOA board. So they're accountable. That doesn't happen in national elections where these experts are ignoring us completely because they think they're smarter than us and they think we're all idiots. Here's the first screenshot from this piece where they absolutely nail it. The failure of the so-called experts. They say, quote, "The failure began with the country's top consultants and pollsters." These are the pollster failures. Oh, again, experts in the election who totally let us down. Candidate Trump did almost everything lavishly. Paid political consultants would have told him. He listened to them and did tell him not to do, and he won. He did almost everything, and he won. The most respected pollsters, meanwhile, predicted a landslide for Hillary Clinton. America's best and brightest political adepts turned out to know very little about the elections they claimed to understand. Pollsters. They're the experts, right? Dictating public policy by what the public believes and don't believe. Hey, we took a poll, it said this. We took a poll, it said that. It's amazing that the pollsters and political consultants were paying all this money to. Again, as our piece just said, Trump did everything they told him to do and did everything they told him not to do, and he still won. Do you get the whole point of that? That it was a 50-50 shot what a political pollster and consultant told you to do would win or not. Because Trump did everything they said and everything they told him not to do, and he still won. And yet we're supposed to turn over again our lives, forfeit our lives over to these so-called, air quotes, experts. Experts who had a 50-50 shot of getting it right. That sounds like a coin flip to me. Save yourself the money on the consultants. Here's another area the experts completely blew it. The foreign policy geniuses. It says the theory that made sense only if you couldn't grasp the obvious reasons for Mr. Trump's victory, namely that Hillary Clinton was a terrible candidate and that Obama-era progressivism had become sufficiently unpopular in the Midwest to throw the election to the nationalist candidate. Somehow, it was easier for smart and accomplished people to believe that a TV celebrity and a political neophyte with attention deficit issues had entered into a diabolically ingenious pact with a foreign dictator. in which the dictator helped him pick up just enough votes in the states he needed to win. So we had the geniuses in the media. I'm sorry, I had that backwards. We had the experts in the media telling us that Trump was involved in an assault on democracy and that he had somehow colluded with Vladimir Putin to win the election. An utter absurdity. Any sane person would have thrown out the window immediately. But note it, folks. Note it, write it, tattoo it on your brain. It was the experts in the media. It was the foreign policy crowd that I'll get to next. Again, it kind of parlayed, no pun intended. Tell you that story one day too. From the Russian collusion hoax, where all the geniuses told us this absurd theory was real, and people believed it. And we're supposed to put our faith in what Thomas Sowell would call the unconstrained vision. The unconstrained vision that we have these really super smart people that are so brilliant. They are unconstrained by human limits that if we turn our lives over to them, the same people who blew the polls, who blew the political consulting, who told us the collusion hoax was real, we're supposed to place our faith in them for our lives, our healthcare, our kids' education, everything. This is ridiculous. Here we go with the foreign policy geniuses and experts that failed us. It says, quote, America's foreign policy elite didn't perform appreciably better. For decades, they insisted that peace between Israel and the Arab world was impossible without a long-term solution to the Israel-Palestinian problem. It was an axiom, no longer even up for debate, folks. Don't you dare even ask. Yet Mr. Trump followed through on a promise, long made but not kept by the U.S. government, to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Foreign policy experts the world over predicted hellish payback from the Arab world. But the recognition went forward. The U.S. Embassy moved, and the payback consisted of a day's worth of inconsequential protests. Again, ladies and gentlemen, the danger going forward of an ever-expanding federal government and anti-subsidiarity, moving the management of your life, your taxes, your business, your kids' education, your health care, moving the management of all of those things critical to your very existence and livelihood in life, moving them far away from your local town, government, city council, and state, and into the hands of a federal government dominated by so-called experts who can't seem to get everything right. How is this not a recipe for disaster? And then in turn, after they get everything wrong, daring to silence you, which is what they're trying to do to this show now, for daring to ask common sense questions we should all be asking. Here's the last one, where when we turned our lives and businesses over to experts at the national and state level, when it came to managing the coronavirus, what happened? Catastrophe happened. And I'm going to get to the consequences of this disaster next. Last cut from this Wall Street Journal piece. The Trump administration made its share of mistakes during the early stages of the pandemic, although its chief failing was the president's lack of rhetorical clarity. But the outstanding failure of the 2020 pandemic was the experts' belief that the only sensible response involves sustained closures of businesses and schools. By any set of criteria outside the self-contained system of public health best practices, the lockdowns failed. They purchased minor slowdowns in the spread of the virus at the cost of punishing economic destruction, untold social dysfunction, and mind-blowing public debt. Folks, I said to you again in a very popular show last week, we did very well last week, thanks to you, and I deeply appreciate it. One of the other things we brought up was I'm seeing an increasing number of articles going to places we don't want to go about how the country is breaking up. It's rupturing at the seams. We have groups of people who don't talk to each other. We have media people who want other media people silenced. We have media people who want any outstanding, outside of what they consider mainstream analysis, silenced, bankrupted. We cannot continue like this. And I discussed how the options going forward are getting increasingly dangerous and have to be avoided. And one of the options I'd mentioned to you that I think would work for getting to some kind of public smoking of the proverbial peace pipe, some public rapprochement here, would be a shrinking of the federal government and delegating powers, constitutional powers, which are supposed to be delegated to the states, back to the states. Let the locals in the states handle their business.
You just heard Dan Bongino.